Hey folks, I'm David McKnight, best-selling author of The Power of Zero. In today's video, you'll see part 2 of my interview with financial advisor and radio show host David Hayes, in which we discuss, among other things, whether you really should be worried about taxes going up on your 401ks and IRAs on January 1st, 2026.
All right, Dave, a lot of rules changed with retirement accounts. Of course, we've been proponents, and of course, I'm a disciple of David McKnight on moving money from taxable to tax-free, never put $1 away tax deferred, always pay the tax now. We're at these historically low numbers, and we have 2 years and 2 months left before the tax code expires and it goes back to where it was before. And as you've said before, Dave, that doesn't keep you up at night. We're going to 39.6%. It's really what the Congressional Budget Office says every single year, where tax rates have to be for simply to pay for the things we've already promised. That's not keeping it. It's where they could go. And I think I'm going to get your opinion on this rule change in a second. But if you say taxes have to double, and literally that's what they say every single year, and you're like, there's no way the taxes will ever double. Would you please take a look at history, right, Dave?
Right. Yeah, I mean, we're sort of lulled into, at least in the last 20 years or so, we're lulled into this idea that, hey, tax rates are low. They've always been this low. And until you sort of zoom back and look at history, you realize, hey, just in the wake of World War II, tax rates were as high as 94%. As recently as the 70s, they were as high as 70%. So who's to say we couldn't go back to those types of rates in the future? I've done lots of YouTube videos where I basically make the case we're going to have European style taxes of 50%, but we're just not going to get all the goodies in exchange for that 50%. We're not going to get paid maternity. We're not going to get, workers compensate, all these great things that you get, universal health care, and we're going to be paying for debt. And that's what we're going to get in exchange for our 50%. And so, yeah, it's a dire outlook.
Yeah, and I think about it like interest rates, right? We've been lulled into this environment of low interest rates for so long, and all of a sudden interest rates are so high, and it's this massive shock. And can you imagine if we just stayed at these levels or even higher levels for the next 20 years? It'd devastate people. So I think taxes are a lot the same way. Who wouldn't have taken a mortgage out at 2%? But who wants to take one out at 8% or 10% or 12%? Or history tells you back in the early 80s, it was like 14 or 17%. My dad was in banking back then. He can tell you the horror stories of that. All right. So we always think about how we're going to pay for all this. The low hanging fruit is retirement accounts. There is around $30 to $31 trillion reportedly in tax deferred retirement accounts. I did a podcast on, is the IRS spying on your IRA? And the answer was yes, because every May they send a 5498 out that says, hey, guess what? This is how much I have in my deferred retirement accounts. They are spying on it. Well, you have to take minimum distributions. Remember, you have a partner in your retirement account. It is the IRS. They get to tell you how much is theirs and when you have to take it out, which is a bad deal. I'd never make that deal with any other partner. And they used to be 70.5, went to 72, then 73. And for anyone born in 1960 or after, now it's 75. So I'm thinking, wait a second, the peak of the baby boom generation was born around 60, 61. That's a lot of people with a lot of money. Well, then I looked at some projections, and it was projected they potentially could have 50 to 80, up to $80 trillion in tax-deferred retirement accounts by the time they're 75. So how old are those folks right now? They're 61 to 65. So here's my theory. You let 10 years roll by, and no one does anything because everyone's stupid, and they just kind of keep pulling the window shade down, as you've said in your book. And all of a sudden they're 75 and they have to start taking money out. Well, number one, they have to take more out because they're older. 2, they're going to die sooner. And then 3, the rules changed on inherited IRAs, so the kids are going to have to take it out quicker. So my theory is you have this big, massive bubble of money that's going to be percolating, and it would be for these people, 10 years from now, they're going to have to start taking it out. And then the next year it's more, and next year it's more, and next year it's more, and that solves a big problem. So my joke is these people in Washington that plan these budgets might be smarter than you think. Like they're licking their chops. What do you think about that, Dave?
It's a really interesting theory, and it makes a lot of sense.
I want you to start using it, by the way.
Okay, I will. I promise.
Perfect.
I've
stole everything you've ever done, Dave. So why not steal something I've done for once?
It's a great theory. This much we know is that 80% of Americans don't wait until 72 or 73 or 75 to draw down that money, right? So they have to take more than their required minimum distribution. So a lot of these people are going to be drawing down those dollars years in advance of whenever their RMDs are. However, you're right. There are a lot of people that don't need that money and won't take that money out unless forced to do so. But you know what? I also believe that the federal government needs a lot of money between now and when these folks turn 75, because, you know, between now and 2033, the national debt grows by $2 trillion per year.
Right.
So they're going to need money to come from somewhere. It's already starting to put a lot of pressure on the fiscal outlook of the country. Interest rates are going to keep going up. I saw something that said that the interest rates could go up to 14% because countries aren't willing to loan us money anymore because they don't think we can pay it back, or they think they're going to pay it back with inflated dollars or what have you. And so it's once again this massive confluence of factors that's going to come to a head around 2030. I just think we need a lot more revenue in the short term, but certainly, I mean, you're right. The whole reason they have RMDs is because the federal government wants to have a predictable source of revenue years down the road so that they can understand how they're going to fund all these unfunded obligations.
I promoted your documentary, The Tax Train is Coming, and I know a lot of people have watched it. It's great. It's a great documentary. I know it's still, what's interesting when you watch it right now, it's almost, it's still relevant, but the numbers have moved so quickly.
The numbers are all out of whack, right?
Geez, yeah. It's like, holy heck. So I love one of the stories, and I use this in some of my talks that I give, but one of the stories that you tell is your story of the Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner, and how it's so relative to how Americans behave and act when it comes to these kinds of issues, and many, many more. Please share that story with our listeners, Dave.
Sure, you bet. I often use this in all of my talks as well. I talk about how not long ago I was watching The Roadrunner, and we know who always is trying to kill the Roadrunner. That's Wile E. Coyote. And Wile E. Coyote is up to his usual no good, trying to kill the Roadrunner, and he's building a bomb with which to do so, made, of course, by Acme, inside a shed that was also made by Acme. And he was so focused and intent on finishing this bomb that he didn't realize that the Roadrunner had pushed his shed onto a train track. And he was so focused and intent on finishing this bomb that he also didn't realize until the last possible moment that there was a huge freight train bearing down on his shack. And I always ask the audience, if you found yourselves on a train track with a huge freight train bearing down on you, what would you do? And they always say, oh, we would get off the tracks. That's exactly right. I go back to the Coyote. Coyote sees this huge freight train bearing down on him, and instead of jumping out of the way, what does he do? He simply pulls down the window shade, thinking that the act of doing so would make the problem go away. Did the problem go away? No. Of course, there's a big explosion. Does the Coyote ever really die? No. It's frustrating, but as the smoke cleared away, you could see him sort of limping off screen, very much the worse for wear. And the reason I bring this up is because as Americans who've done the lion's share of our saving for retirement, what we call tax-deferred vehicles, like 401ks and IRAs, we have a very real tax freight train that's bearing down on us. And we got a couple of choices of what we can do. We can pretend like the problem doesn't really exist. We can pretend like the math to which people like David Walker have referred to over time doesn't really add up, but that's a little bit like pulling down that window shade. Or you can implement some strategies starting right now to help get yourselves off the tracks and shield yourself from the impact of higher taxes. Okay, folks, that was part 2 of my interview with David Hayes. If you would like some help implementing a balanced, comprehensive approach to tax-free retirement that shields you from the impact of higher taxes down the road, head on over to davemcknight.com and click on the Connect with an Advisor button. I'm happy to refer you to an advisor in the Power Zero network that has been trained, vetted, and qualified personally by me. If you're a financial professional and want to learn how to become a certified Power Zero advisor, head on over to powerofzero.com and opt into my free video series. And if you have any comments or questions, feel free to drop them into the comment section below. I'll respond to every single one of them personally. And don't forget to click like, subscribe, and the bell so you never miss a video. This is David McKnight. I look forward to seeing you on the next video.